In Dune, Paul Atreides says the power to destroy a thing is the absolute control over it. I believe it's time for anyone serious about social justice, representative non corporate democracy, accountability in general, and especially the safety of black and brown people in our country from state sanctioned murder to surcease the purchase of all products from Kentucky by their households and their businesses immediately. While the state of Kentucky has banned no knock warrants, Kentucky's cowardly senators have not secured a vote to pass Rand's Justice for Breonna Taylor Act, despite their majority and Moscow Mitch's position as leader of their caucus. The bottom line is, as usual, if it isn't a policy he can monetize through lobbyists, Moscow Mitch does not care. While I understand that Kentuckians depend on the inflow of money from liquor sales to fund their workforces, the effort of their elected leaders and the owners of their corporate distilleries has been insufficient to ensure their fellow Americans that they stand with us in trying to create a more just, more safe country for black and brown people. Business as usual is not appropriate while Breonna's murderers remain uncharged. Selling bourbons whose proceeds will go to scholarships in her name is nice, but it does nothing for the thousands of black women to whom every day Kentucky's elected leaders inaction says, your life does not matter to us. Woodford is happy to sell new releases of their bottles this weekend, hoping to line their shareholders' coffers as our country still mourns this innocent young woman. Moscow Mitch was the featured speaker at the Distilled Spirit Council's inaugural conference earlier this year. The DSC's chairman, Chris Swanger, has contributed $2,500 to Moscow Mitch's re-election campaign this year. He has also previously contributed to Ted Cruz, Steve King, and Richard Burr. As Kentucky gears up for an election today in which it will be difficult for black people to vote due to an absurdly low number of polling locations in black neighborhoods, you can be comforted sipping your new Woodford 5 Wood, knowing that bourbon's most high-profile lobbyist has given money to an avowed white supremacist, a senator who committed insider trading to make a buck off Americans during the start of a pandemic, and a senator who once said, regarding the previous Democratic president's administration, I don't know that they've yet violated the Third Amendment, but I expect them to start quartering soldiers in people's homes soon. Well, the bunker boy that Teddy voted for hasn't billeted armed forces in Americans' homes, but he has sent them to the streets to tear gas civilians, seemingly a preferable option to these politicians in comparison to passing legislation to ensure the safety of black and brown people in their homes. I have been disappointed with drinks industry bloggers and furloughed workers who have continued to record podcasts about bourbon and workshop Kentucky spirit-based cocktails over social media in the weeks since Breonna Taylor's death. I find showing off bluegrass state spirits procured for lower prices because of the Mar-a-Lago virus pandemic to be crass at the moment. As you can tell, I loathe Moscow Mitch and Rand Paul for all their plutocratic policies and their overt contempt for the poor. Their own party's trade wars has led to the decrease of sales of products like Jim Beam in Europe at the moment. We put tariffs on like French wine, and they have, as anyone could have predicted, put retaliatory tariffs on American spirits, and that's cost them, it's cost American jobs. It's just, and I'm not some neoliberal like free trade like globalist. I think the World Trade Organization is one of the biggest like sort of shams that's ever really happened to anyone. That being said, this kind of stuff it's set up the way it is for a reason. The neoliberals did what they did in the 90s for a reason. Like, if you try to put tariffs on something like French wine, the EU is going to retaliate immediately. That's how the game works. Like, you could see that coming from thousands of miles away, literally. So the Kentucky spirits market is vulnerable, and I believe this is a real chance for Kentuckians to examine their ideals and whether they care about their fellow citizens, and to choose leaders who will work for the people, not just for weapons lobbyists, essentially. As Chris Swanger was also a lobbyist who worked for weapons manufacturers before he became the chair of the Distilled Spirits Council. And I'm not looking for anyone to sign some petition. Just spend a few weeks or months until we get Moscow Mitch out and enact some real police reforms. Spend a few not buying bourbon, not buying, Kentucky Rise. Essentially vote with your pocketbook. And I understand there are some people who are like, well, that kind of thing doesn't work. But, like voting also doesn't work, like Bunker Boy lost the election. Voting on small elections definitely works, like federal elections, not really. So maybe this won't work, but there's a chance that it could. Like I said, this market is vulnerable already. If 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 people stopped, and especially if businesses stopped either carrying these products or buying these products at the moment, you eventually these people would have to turn around and do something because they're answerable to their constituents, and also ultimately to their lobbyists. Unfortunately, ultimately to their lobbyists, they should be answerable to their constituents first, of course. But that's a pipe dream. And bourbon doesn't go bad. It'll still be there in late November, but Breonna Taylor will not be there. And there's a good chance that people she knows well will have their votes suppressed today and in November. That's Moscow Mitch's playbook. He's learned from the best in his idol, Vladimir Putin, who's been in power for 20 years. So and Kentucky does not allow no excuse early voting, so this boycott can't really end early, essentially. So if you need American booze, hooch, then I'll put a link to a black-owned distillery in Tennessee in the info here. Be safe. Black lives matter. Brown lives matter. Trans lives matter. Fortune passes everywhere, but it hasn't passed for Breonna Taylor. Say her name.